Hello and welcome back to Surf Progression Techniques. I'm your host, Chapin Cruder. Just want to thank you so much for joining me today because today we'll be going over the 5 things you should consider about your surfboard if you want to learn to turn. And I get a lot of questions via email from struggling surfers out there requesting my help in helping them either 1, learn how to turn, or 2, just to improve their turns. And the immediate questions I respond with are, what type of turns do you want to do? Number 1. Number 2 is, what type of equipment are you riding? And number 3 is, what type of waves are you practicing on? Now, these 3 questions help me gather a lot of information about the surfers because sometimes, and a lot of times, what it takes is me helping frame in a realistic expectation of where they're at within their turns and where they're actually trying to get to with their turns. Because I get a lot of responses, for example, that say, hey, I'm riding a 70s retro fish, and in their original email they had requested that I can help them learn to do more vertical turns. Now, you can turn anything. I said this before in past videos. I mean, there's plenty of examples of professional longboarders going vertical on their longboards. You can do airs. I mean, on bigger boards, like everything is possible. But under the circumstances that most of us find ourselves in, we have limited access to types of equipment. We have limited waves that we're surrounded by. You know, we have kind of our local break that we know breaks a lot or that we feel most comfortable at. And so it's important that we kind of frame in a realistic expectation and goal for ourselves for what we're working with. And that's why I created this video, to help you answer these questions for yourself so you can then come to a conclusion that, okay, yes, I'm on the right track in order to complete the types of turns and maneuvers that I want. Or no, I've completely overestimated what I'm trying to accomplish with the equipment that I have. Or I've underestimated what I'm trying to accomplish with the equipment that I have. And it's just important that you get your mind in the right place than to go out and execute the type of turns that you want. So you may or may not know your board dimension spectrum, but it is something that's important to get to know, and I'm sure all of you have used a volume calculator before. I'm using Firewires. I like it. I've never used a Firewire surfboard, however, so I'm not necessarily advocating buying Firewires. This is a tool that I like and use, so that's what I'm going to use right here. But it is very important to become comfortable with the spectrum in which you can utilize to then get a range of boards that you can choose from. So, you pick your level as you have done, your fitness level, average. I just kind of threw some information out there. 35-year-old human being, weight, 60, 75, body type, male, and then click and boom, we have this nice board spectrum that we can choose from. Now, obviously, it's a Firewire calculator, so they're going to obviously encourage you to buy their boards. I'm not at all advocating buying Firewires, never ridden one myself, but you can now get a pretty good idea of where you might fall into on this spectrum of dimensions. So you have at the high end, you got like 41 liters under you, and at the low end, you have like 38 liters. And the range is from, like 6'6" of height and then all the way down to 6'2". So, that's quite a few inches there to work with, and width as well, and then thickness as well. So that's a pretty nice spectrum that you can kind of be pulling from as you start to hone in on the types of equipment that are going to make it easy for you to progress and do the types of turns and maneuvers that you want. And then you can also take it a little farther and think a little bit outside of that box, which is, going up in liters and dimensions if you just feel like you're still struggling. Because again, this is just a suggestion on spectrum that you can be utilizing. Or you can go down as well. You like everything in this spectrum that I've tried, rented, whatever, is too easy for me. So I'm going to push it a little bit harder, go down in board size, go down in volume, go down in dimensions to keep myself on that edge of progression and whatnot. And you can kind of use that framework to, push and pull as you start to pick and choose equipment. And it's important to note that, if you are going down in board size, you need to be at least popping up and successfully popping up on your surfboard going down the line, 99.9% of the time. There's really no reason for anybody to be going down in board size if you're still popping up only even 80-90% of the time and making your pop-ups and going down the line. Like, you'll know when it's time to drop in size when you're popping up so effortlessly, getting to your feet, going down the line, and you might not be doing turns. Your feet still might be frozen on that surfboard, but then you can start thinking about, okay, maybe tapering down a little bit to then help you get more control over the surfboard. Because let's face it, if you can get on a little bit smaller of a board, you can kind of start being the master of that surfboard a little bit easier when it comes to like forcing turns. And forcing turns isn't necessarily a bad thing because you can start to really get the feel for things. I mean, obviously we want to do the right technique to execute turns because that really helps us do the right type of body mechanics so that we don't learn bad habits. But I mean, I started tapering down pretty early and got very comfortable forcing turns, and I was able to do turns, but I also was not doing the types of turns that I was super proud of. So it's kind of that like catch-22. So going down in size, does make certain aspects a lot harder. Getting to your feet is going to be harder. Paddling and catching waves is going to be a bit harder. But, you do get a board that then you can kind of like manhandle, if you will, and kind of get it to do what you want when you want, even if your body mechanics aren't perfect. But be careful because it can also have the contrary effect and keep you equally as stuck and equally as frustrated because, again, like I said, you're having trouble catching waves and trouble getting to your feet. So it's kind of that fine line we walk. But as long as you have that spectrum to work with, now you can sort of tease your line in either direction to really start honing in on that kind of perfect type of shape for yourself. And then it's also going to be important to note which tail functions best for learning to turn. And there's so many different tails out there nowadays, the different varieties of tails that actually do quite a lot of different things for you. And I'm not a shaper, but I know the shapers who are creating these tails have a reason for them. But in my experience, everyone kind of uses that squash tail as a standard level of tail to kind of do everything with. And you have a swallowtail, you have a pintail for, bigger waves, barely waves. The guns kind of have the pintails on them. The square tails are kind of built for like more quicker release in certain circumstances. And then you have, double wing swallowtails and rocket tails and like, what does all this mean? And so it's one of those situations that you're going to have to kind of piece together for yourself based on the waves that you have at your disposal. And again, like, what are you trying to accomplish? With the example I used earlier of the gentleman writing me saying he wants to do more critical vertical turns, and I asked him to send me a photo of the board that he was riding, and it was just super V'd out retro fish. And yes, you can, Craig Anderson or Dane Reynolds can probably do really vertical critical turns on an old school 70s retro fish, but it's not easy. And you're not making it any easier on yourself trying to do those types of turns with that type of equipment. So again, it's kind of like I said, you're really trying to pair your goals with the right type of equipment to help you get to where you're going. So that squash tail is a good place to start. It's an all-around good tail to have under you when you're trying to do anything from bottom turns to top turns to airs to whatever. But then, with these kind of hybrid-y types of tails, you do get some interesting things that you can really feel under your feet. And when I was younger, Richie Collins was shaping my boards at the time, and he was a big professional of his day. And he basically told me that he was going to shape me a board that had training wheels on it, which obviously as a young cocky surfer, I didn't want. But he said, no, this is really going to help you understand how it feels for a board to make turns. And so what he did was he shaped me a double wing swallowtail. And it always stuck out in my mind that he knew that this type of tail was going to make it way easier for me at the level that I was at to help me really understand what it felt like to do turns. And he was right. I got this board and I went out and used it, and I was doing turns that I had never done before. I was going more vertical. And again, I don't know the hydrodynamics of why that tail makes it easier for you to do turns, but it did for me. And I've always kind of used that and kind of guided people into maybe trying those types of surfboards with, the double wing swallowtail or even a swallowtail type of board. And then recently with the invention of the rocket tail right here, it's one of those things also that I feel is a tail that can really aid you in making it a little bit easier to do the types of turns that you want. You can really feel a difference under you when you're surfing down the wave with these types of tails that it's way easier when I put a little bit of pressure on my toes or heels to get the board to do what I want. You just feel more in command of the surfboard with those two types of tails under you. Now, again, I'm not suggesting you rush out and buy a brand new rocket or a brand new whatever's out there that has a double wing swallowtail already attached to it that you can just pull off the rack. Remember, I'm only advocating that if you are going to start looking for new equipment, please buy used equipment, rent equipment, try a friend's board so you can start to feel the difference of these different types of tails. So then you can really hone in on what's working for you at the level you're at right now, along with the waves that you have at your disposal. Because these different types of tails and different types of models will work differently under different circumstances and different conditions. And then moving on to number 3, which is know which fin setup is easiest to turn. And this is kind of a trick question because it really doesn't make that big of a difference whether you ride a quad fin or a tri-fin when you're trying to learn to turn or doing different types of maneuvers. There is, I think, a speed difference between both of these kind of boards. And as far as technique goes, when you are trying to turn a quad versus a tri-fin, there are some subtle differences. But as far as learning to turn goes, you can learn to turn on a quad or a tri-fin equally as easily. So it's equally as easy. So it's not as if you need to choose one or the other in order to progress faster at your turns. I will definitely make specific decisions based on the type of wave that I'm going to go ride. And I personally prefer a quad fin on like a fatter, mushier wave because I feel like I just get a lot more speed and lift off of my board. It kind of feels like a magic carpet or a little skateboard under me as I'm riding down the open face of a bigger, kind of fatter, mushier wave. And I'll always choose a tri-fin when it's in a little bit heavier, more bowly, steep waves with more critical sections that I want to try to turn on. I personally, just my style when I am trying to do turns on a quad, I have to be very delicate because I generally tend to push too hard when I'm riding a quad and I slide out a lot. So it's a personal preference. A lot of people have different experiences with these types of fin setups, and those are just mine. For fatter, mushier waves, I'm kind of on a quad playing around, skating around, and then on a little bit thicker, heavier, barely waves with critical top turn sections, then I'm riding more of a tri-fin. And then moving on to the 4th thing you should consider, which is which fin to choose to help you turn. And this is one of those things, again, with fins kind of becoming the Bic razor of the surf industry. They're giving you all these options that are going to make you think that you can go, accelerate faster, carve better, perform better, react faster, whatever. When the reality is it doesn't really work like that, especially at the intermediate level, beginner level, even in the advanced levels. A lot of advanced guys will say they can barely feel the difference with all these different types of fins out there. So don't get sucked into thinking that you need 4 different types of fins for 4 different types of conditions to go and do the types of things that you want. It's not like that. What I really want you to focus in on, though, is the size of the fin and whether it's small, medium, or large, because that does make a difference. If you're riding bigger waves because you're comfortable in bigger waves, you're going to want a large fin, for example, over a small fin. If it's a big face and you're riding a small fin, the odds of you sliding out are a lot higher. Generally, you can get away with a medium fin in most conditions, unless it's really, really big. You definitely probably want to be stepping up your fin size a bit, but don't get sucked into the trap of spending, $90, $100 and something bucks on all these different types of fins, because it's just at the level that you're at, the intermediate, advanced level, whatever it may be, beginner. It's just you're not going to feel the difference in the way that these companies are selling it to you. So just really focusing on more of a small, medium, or large. And like I said, I stick more to the medium range and stick to the cheaper brands as well. My personal taste, I'm not a huge, I don't like the fiberglass fins. I actually prefer the plasticky ones more because I like that little bit of flexibility and release. But again, that's a personal preference that you're going to have to feel out. But there are options where you can get, cheaper fins, and test different types of fins and different styles without having to pay those high dollar amounts to get the Performer or the Carver or whatever those things are. There is one other aspect, however, of fin choice that I would like you to consider before you maybe go out for a session, and that is the rake of the fin. Now, the rake of the fin can affect your turns, but not necessarily in the whole turn itself. It's more about the access point in which the turn is coming from, or the fin's coming from. So imagine surface area of the fin. So the more surface area you have, it's hard to pivot within the water because you have these two opposing forces with so much surface area. Like the width of, say, a big sheet of plastic, trying to spin it in water would be like spinning a turbine, for example. Where if you had, a more narrow, say, bar that you stuck into water and you did the same spinning motion, it would spin a lot more freely on that access point. And that's what we're talking about here, is that pivot point in which you can make a turn with, which is affected by the rake of the fin. And then you can then go apply that concept to your fin choice when you're going out to, say, a point break, or a wave that's a little bit steeper on the face, or a mushier wave that doesn't really have those critical steep sections where you can really draw out your turns more and make longer turns rather than these like short little snappy turns up under the lip. You won't really notice a difference, but it is something that I do think about and think that you should be aware of as well, because again, like, there's so much different information being thrown at you about fins. And as far as I'm concerned, the two most important things about fins right now for where you're at are the size of the fins and then the rake of the fins. And you probably won't even notice the rake, but it is something to consider when you are trying to make turns on the face of a wave. And then the fifth and final point to consider as you're choosing your equipment to go surf for a session, or as you start considering maybe buying something different for yourself, is what type of waves are you surfing on a regular basis? This is going to make a huge difference in the type of equipment that you choose, the type of fins that you choose for each session. And it's really important to note, because if you are trying to really improve your turns and maneuvers, you're going to want to start using the right type of equipment as well as the right type of mindset as you start to approach. So if you're surfing a reef break, which is way more predictable because it's always breaking in the same place, well, then you can then apply different types of equipment, and since you're going to have more or less of a cookie cutter type of wave, you're going to be able to really differentiate the differences of each piece of equipment you have on your feet a lot faster than, say, somebody who's surfing a beach break where everything's always changing and you don't get that consistent type of wave that you can then say, oh, this board works really well in, say, a steeper type of condition, where it doesn't work as well in a smaller, mushier type of condition. And point breaks are awesome because point breaks generally have different sections on the wave face that you can get, like a speedy section, you can get a slow mushy section, back into a speedy barrely section, and you can really start to feel the difference of your board and how it's working throughout each portion of that wave. So you can hone in a lot faster then on the type of equipment that is going to be best for you to progress at a faster rate. And it's also going to be important to take into consideration the wave size. Are they big waves, small waves, glassy days, stormy days? All these conditions can really affect the equipment choice for that day and what you're trying to accomplish. So, if you're trying to do turns on a board that doesn't really work well in stormy days, I've had boards that only work good in stormy days and work absolutely terrible on sheet glass, perfect long points. For some reason, I could never figure it out, but it was just the way the board was. Something about it reacted really well in stormy, unpredictable conditions, and I could just flow through these sections so effortlessly and do turns in critical portions of these really stormy, weird wave faces. So it's going to be really important to note all these variables as you start to really hone in again on that piece of equipment that's going to help you really progress and learn to turn a lot better. So for me, the ideal test conditions for a board that I'm trying to get used to, trying to figure out, trying to learn how to turn, are test conditions such as this, Find an open face wave that is long and doesn't barrel the whole way. And this really gives you the opportunity to take your time, set your feet, get that foot as far back as you can on the surfboard, that back foot, in order to maximize control over the surfboard, to then move down the line and start executing little turns and top turns and maneuvers that you are trying to execute, because you'll really get a better feel for what it's like when you have maximum control over that surfboard. And you want long, workable waves, not short, fast ones. I know it's not easy for everyone to find these types of waves, but if you can, you're gonna really do yourself a favor if you give yourself enough time on a wave to really, again, feel the board under your feet, really over-exaggerate all your upper body mechanics and lower body mechanics, bending your knees, twisting your upper torso, swinging those arms through the turns to really feel what it's like to have that board under you, and the correct type of body mechanics then to execute a turn. And then examples of really great waves are point breaks or mushy peaks. Point breaks give you all those nice, long, different sections on one wave that you can then feel what the board and how it responds in those sections. As you're going down a point break, you can encounter a really speedy fast section, a very slow mushy shoulder, back into a speedy fast section. So those are really great for testing equipment and then really testing where your level's at and giving you a better understanding if you're on the right equipment for your level. And same with bigger kind of mushier peaks. Gives you, unless you're riding a super small board and you're not catching anything, it does give you a nice open face that you can work with that equipment, really over-exaggerate your body mechanics to then feel if you're on the right equipment for your level at that time. So with that said, I just want to thank you again for joining me, your host, Chapin Cruder, and Surf Progression Techniques, for trying to really help you understand the 5 considerations, the 5 things you should consider about your surfboard if you want to learn to turn. I know it's a topic that a lot of us feel these shop owners and these salesmen kind of make for us. They say like, oh, this type of board is really going to help you get this type of result. And what I'm trying to do here is help you walk in with a little bit of information in your back pocket that then you can ask the right questions, or you can then go out and seek out the type of equipment that you think is going to be best for you in the moment that you're in, at the level that you're at, to help you progress to that level that you want to get to help you progress to that type of turn that you want to, or whatever it may be. So really get to know that board spectrum that you kind of fall in, at the level you're at your fitness level that you're at as well. Hone in on what kind of tail works best for you. Some tails that you try aren't going to work at all. Some tails you're going to be like, this is the best tail and it does the most magical things for me, and it just fits your style, your stance, the width, whatever it may be, it just works. As I said, the fin setup isn't as big of a deal. Whether it's a quad or a tri-fin, you can learn to turn and do maneuvers on both types of fin setups. So don't stress too hard on that. And also don't put tons and tons of thought into the right type of fins. Like I said, the most important things about picking a fin for a session or a fin that you might want to try is the size of the fin, small, medium, or large, and the shape of the rake within the fin, that surface area. And those are the 2 main important things to focus in on. And don't go buying all those super expensive ones that promise you that you're going to perform better or accelerate faster. Just try to, there's always a box of used fins at these surf shops that you can go in. They always have complete sets, and you can be buying, a few different pairs for a lot cheaper than you could be buying the brand new ones. And that's what I always do, and that's what I recommend. So take these 5 things into consideration, with your equipment and your level of where you're at, the waves that you're surfing on a daily basis, and then go out and apply these things so that you can start to learn to turn and progress a lot faster. Thank you so much for joining me. If you found this helpful, please share it with somebody you think it might help, because there's so many people out there who are stuck, who need this type of information, and they probably really appreciate you just throwing them a bone and saying, hey, this helped me, this might help you as well. So thank you again for listening. Stay tuned. There is more to come, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.